to the comics. I love the Spider-Man
like,
no more.
subscribe, the bell notification, and whatever else YouTube has you clicking on to support us.
What's up, everyone? I'm the Kaiju no Kami from the Toku Animation News Network, and today I'm going to be taking a look at, well, not really showing clips, because you know YouTube and clips, especially for American movies, but I'm going to be ranking the Spider-Man movie series, as I just finished rewatching the entire series, all 8 movies, from the first Raimi all the way through No Way Home, and I figured, hey, you know what? I like Spider-Man, most of you like Spider-Man. Someday I'm going to tackle the Spider-Man Toei TV series. Let's just do a little video of talking about the Spider-Man movies and ranking them. I'm not going to go full in-depth reviews with them. I'll say some things about the movies that come to mind. But overall, you know what? If you want a traditional Spider-Man experience, you go with the Raimi trilogy. If you want a more dark, serious, grittier Spider-Man adventure, there's the 2 Amazing movies with Andrew Garfield. But if you want to watch a Spider-Man series that has Spider-Man set in a Marvel universe that's already diverse, has lots of already established heroes, you got the Holland trilogy, which also has a great, nice variety of stories in there. Every series has its positives, every series has its negatives. I will say the biggest point of frustration I have is it seems like each movie from each era has Spider-Man quipping less and less. Like, he did some great quipping in the first Raimi movie, then it was a little bit less in Spider-Man 2, and I don't think he really quipped at all in Spider-Man 3. Amazing Spider-Man, he had a lot of quipping, especially when he was like taunting a carjacker. And then there really wasn't much of any quipping in Amazing Spider-Man 2. And then the same thing in the MCU trilogy. We had him quipping in Homecoming. Then it kind of was reduced in Far From Home to actually almost little to nothing. And then he's sort of quipped in No Way Home, but not as much as could be. Which was kind of disappointing, because there are so many great quotes that they could just take directly out of the comics. Like him saying to Mysterio, hey, your lasers seem to be failing. You know they have a pill for that, right? Or something like that. Anyway. Alright, number 8 is the worst Spider-Man movie, and that is The Amazing Spider-Man 2. This movie is a complete mess. A horrifying mess. We have, for some reason, they got Paul Giamatti in there to poorly act as a dude that would eventually become Rhino, and he is only in the beginning of the movie for like 20 seconds, and then at the end of the movie for like 20 seconds. I mean, it's really more than 20 seconds, but... And then we have this in between, we've got the storyline where they go Batman Forever with Electro, because he's basically just the Riddler, but as Electro. And then we have Harry as Green Goblin just showing up out of the blue as Goblin with this story of his cells degenerating. And the first time we get introduced to Norman Osborn is when he dies, and it's just a horrifying mess of a film. The only saving grace is the chemistry between Garfield and Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy. That's like the only saving grace for the film, and the fight scenes. The fight scenes are pretty well shot. Has a pretty cool soundtrack for those fight scenes, especially for Electro. But it's a horrible movie, and they ruined Gwen Stacy way too soon. They should not have killed her off that soon. She should have been in at least one more movie, or whatever. But yes, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is my least favorite Spider-Man film. Following that is Spider-Man 3. But I will say the editor's cut is much better than the theatrical cut. They take a scene out. Well, there's only minor differences. Like, the movie is still boring as all hell. But there's a couple scenes they remove that improve it. There's a scene that they remove for Harry with his butler that really improves the characterization of Harry, because then he goes and helps Peter on his own volition instead of being told something that didn't make sense. Venom is still awful in it. Eddie Brock is still awful. Topher Grace was a complete miscast. In fact, I'm not really a fan of Kirsten Dunst as MJ. I can't think of his name suddenly as Harry, but Topher Grace was the worst casting in the entire series. On the other hand, Church is incredible as Sandman, and it's kind of a shame that he got the shaft for this movie. I actually personally think Spider-Man 3 should have focused solely on maybe Harry creating the Hobgoblin, hiring Kingsley to become the Hobgoblin out of revenge, and because he fails, he becomes the Green Goblin himself, or he finds out, or he realizes that Peter is his friend and stops the Hobgoblin instead of becoming this rocket racer wannabe. Then the next movie could deal with Peter getting the symbiote suit for the first time, and getting the symbiote suit with having Jameson's son go up into space and bring it back. Since they had introduced John Jameson in movie number 2, why not make use of having him in there and establishing that he's an astronaut, have him come back with the symbiote, and we could have had a storyline, okay, Spider-Man fighting Sandman and losing himself to the symbiote suits. And that then he, especially because he finds out that Sandman was the one who actually shot Ben, that it starts to really take away from him. We see his descent into madness throughout the whole movie. And we could have established Eddie Brock in the previous movie, even though they had said Eddie Brock was already working for them in the first Spider-Man. But anyway. And then the 5th movie could have been Venom. Just complete missed opportunities in the long run. Anyway, moving on. Ranking at number 6 would be the first Amazing Spider-Man. I am not a fan of Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker. I think his Peter Parker is too much of a cool kid. Peter Parker would not be skateboarding in the hallway like that. He is supposed to be the nerdy, introverted kid. He's way more active. Gwen, on the other hand, Emma Stone is perfect as Gwen Stacy, and I love that Gwen Stacy is not a damsel in distress in this film, because in the Raimi movies, it got really annoying having MJ be the damsel in distress in every single movie. So it was nice to have Gwen actually be able to hold her own against Lizard, even if it was just a little bit and Lizard didn't really care about her, but still, she fought against him and didn't become a damsel in distress. Thank you. I also do like Peter's Spider-Man, or Garfield's Spider-Man, because he's quipping, like as I said earlier, him insulting the carjacker was just a hilarious scene. Totally loved it. But it does try to be a little too dark and serious for a Spider-Man series. Still, it was a good first attempt at trying something new. I'm not a fan of the way they killed off Ben, because I felt like it kind of diminished Peter feeling responsible for it. But I can totally understand why they didn't want to repeat what they had already done. After that comes Far From Home. That is number 5? Yes, number 5. Far From Home. I really like this movie. I like Mysterio, except I feel like the plot twist with Mysterio kind of takes away a little bit from the character, especially when he starts like mocking wearing costumes and stuff. That really irked me. But there are comments he makes that was like, yeah, audiences will believe whatever you want them to. They will believe the first thing they hear and not believe anyone else. But I liked the whole aspect of Mysterio. I liked the Peter and Michelle MJ scenes. I like how nerdy Peter is and nervous and stuff, because that's very comic accurate. However, the biggest problem with this film is it's not a Spider-Man sequel. It's an Avengers Infinity War and Endgame sequel. You can't just go from Homecoming to Far From Home without having seen Endgame and Infinity War. You have to see those two movies before you watch Far From Home. Otherwise, you're going to be completely lost because nothing will make sense. That's the biggest detriment to this film, is you have to see other non-Spider-Man films to enjoy it. And it didn't occur to me, that did not actually occur to me until we were rewatching the whole series just now. The other day I was like, yeah, I want to rewatch them all. We're not doing Infinity War and Endgame because I want to see how Far From Home holds up without it. And it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And that is the biggest shame of all. That is the biggest detriment to the movie. But other than that, it's a really enjoyable film. And although Nick Fury is a complete idiot, and obviously the post-credit scene, we know why he's an idiot. But again, that post-credit scene doesn't make sense because you have to watch Secret Invasion for it to work. And Secret Invasion was such utter garbage that it completely ruins, that whole post-credit scene is ruined by that, which means Nick Fury is ruined because of that, because of that. Far From Home is just a mess when you consider you have to watch other things to actually fully enjoy what happens in Far From Home. However, I will say that ending is still fantastic. The mid-credit scene is incredible. Alright, number 4. Now this is the hard part because really, numbers 3 and 4 can kind of be interchangeable. I don't know which one I really do like more than the other, but right now I'm putting in number 4, Spider-Man 2. I know people love this movie. People consider this the greatest Spider-Man movie ever made. It's really good. I don't know if I think it's the greatest Spider-Man movie ever made, the greatest comic book movie ever made. There's just little aspects in it that do take away from it. There's too many Raimi-isms, as I call it. That means like close-ups on people screaming. We have an entire Evil Dead scene with Doc Ock's arms, which is cool, but I'm watching a Spider-Man movie, not an Evil Dead movie. If they just toned things down a little bit there, it would have been perfect. I do like Doc Ock. I love Molina as Doc Ock. He is perfect casting for Doc Ock. I like this interpretation. It's not my favorite, but I really like this version of Doc Ock. I wish they had done more with him. I do wish he had been evil on his own volition instead of being taken over by the AI of his tentacles. That would have been more interesting than him just being taken over by... Once again, AI. We see the evils of AI, people. Why are we ignoring them? But anyway, the Peter story is really good. It's nice. I love seeing Peter in college. Because it's basic. We don't really get that. All the other movies focus on Peter in high school. So this was nice to see him actually attending college. But some of the plot doesn't make sense with the way he loses his powers. Now the cartoon series did it well because he lost some of his abilities because his mutation was changing, was getting stronger. He was mutating into the man spider. It made sense there, but here it didn't make sense because it was just a mental block. However, I love the nods to the comics. I love the Spider-Man No More scene when he's walking away in the alley with the suit hanging out of the out of the trash. That shot is like right out of the comic book. There is a lot to love in this. And it's so many memes. Rent, and Jameson doing his laugh. There's a lot of great stuff here. But there's just little things that do take it away from me. That train sequence, fight battle, is really badass despite some of it being clearly CGI. I love watching that fight between Peter and Doc Ock. Alright, so now, number 3, or 4, like I said, it's interchangeable, and that is Spider-Man Homecoming. Unlike Far From Home, despite this taking place after Civil War, you don't need to have watched Civil War to enjoy this movie. You get the idea right at the beginning when they kind of talk about things that happened as to what is going on with this universe of Spider-Man. You don't need to know Civil War to enjoy Homecoming at all. Homecoming is its own self-contained story. It can get a little weird on the gimmick side, given that his suit has been given to him from Tony Stark, and there's all this tech in there. But then in the second half, when they strip that aspect away and he has to use his generic suit that he made himself, it works really well because you're actually seeing him use his abilities himself. And I love the fact that he doesn't have organic web shooters. They kept it comic accurate with him having to have his own built web shooters, and we get to see him experimenting with those. Because I will say the one downside to the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man compared to Holland and Garfield is we never actually had to see Tobey Maguire Spider-Man do his science. He didn't have to create his own web shooters, so we didn't have to see him do that. We never saw him create his own tech. Whereas the other two, we actually got to see the science side to Peter Parker. But Homecoming was a really solid venture. It introduced the characters without you having to have any prior knowledge. Everything was just well told. Vulture is a really well done villain. Michael Keaton plays Vulture just perfectly. And that sequence when they're in the car, when Peter, Liz, and Vulture are in the car talking, is so intense. Oh my god. Very intense. And you know what though? I really feel bad. I am on Team Vulture's side in this movie because Toomes was frickin' screwed over by the government. They come in, they start down-talking him. The least they could did was at least compensate him, but no, they had to be all high and mighty assholes. And frankly, I think he should have punched them all. They had no right to speak to him and his crew like that. That one guy they all deserved to be punched. Especially the little bitch lady. All of them deserved to get punched. He should not have had to bow down to them just because they're government officials on his dirt. Frickin' screw that. Anyway, I think I've said anyway like a million times. Number 2 is the very first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. It is so amazing. Like, I'm not completely sold on Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, but his Peter Parker was incredible. I do not care for Dunst as MJ, although I think she was the best in the first film because it seemed like, especially the third one, which I forgot to mention, the third one, I hated her specifically in the third one the most because she was so goddamn selfish. And Dallas Howard was a great Gwen Stacy. But William Dafoe, phenomenal casting. William Dafoe as Norman Osborn was perfect. In fact, I will say, Norman Osborn, or Green Goblin, Vulture, and Doc Ock in the Spider-Man movies, of all the movies, are the 3 best villains across the entire movie series. All 3 of them are perfectly cast, perfectly acted. I love Mysterio. I loved Sandman. But those 3 are the best. And Aunt May, again, perfect casting. And then J.K. Simmons as Jameson. Oh my god. Just as great as Dafoe and Rosemary Harris. Just as great. Those 3 were completely picked, and no one has been able to top them at all. Then again, the movies haven't tried to top J.K. Simmons because they brought Simmons back for the MCU Jameson. But no one has topped Rosemary Harris as Aunt May because she is the comic book quintessential Aunt May. And no one has topped William Dafoe's Green Goblin or Norman Osborn or any of them. His villain is the best of them all. I also will say that the Raimi series does have the best soundtrack of all the Spider-Man series. Anytime I think of Spider-Man, that Raimi theme song goes in my head from Danny Elfman. Now, I was not a fan of the organic web shooters. That is kind of what drags the movie down a little bit for me, and the Goblin suit. I would have rather, I don't know why, they just felt like they had to have this, like, helmet for Goblin. William Dafoe wearing a mask that actually let you see his facial features would have been so much cooler. Like the one sequence when he's talking to Spider-Man and the eye descend and you see his actual eyes, I think that looks way cooler than having the goggle type, whatever they were, glass eyes on there. But the movie is perfect in being able to retell the origin story of Spider-Man. It just gets so much right that I love this movie. I enjoy it every time. This is the Spider-Man movie I have watched the most. I owned it. I bought the DVD when it first came out. Then I bought the Super Bit DVD when that came out, when I learned what Super Bit was. And I watched the Super Bit DVD probably like, well, not really 100 times, but it felt like 100 times. And I watched the Blu-ray a few times, and then I kind of just moved on and haven't rewatched it as often as I used to. But I used to watch this one so many times because it is just a good movie. I know Toby is much older than he should have been for Peter, but he works. He does quippage in this movie. The costume was great. So much greatness in this one. I adore this movie so much. And then my number one favorite, which is probably obvious by now because there's only one remaining option, and that is No Way Home. No Way Home, I mean, again, Spider-Man 1 and No Way Home can kind of possibly... But No Way Home is incredible. It's the perfect live-action Spider-Verse movie that is a Tom Holland movie first, Spider-Verse movie second. I hope that makes sense. Just like how the animated ones have been a perfect Miles Morales movie first and a Spider-Verse movie second. Same thing here. It's a Tom Holland movie. It continues directly after where Far From Home left off. You don't have to have watched any of the other MCU movies to follow this one. In fact, I don't think any of the other... I mean, all the other MCU movies have to take place after No Way Home because this is a direct sequel to Far From Home, and Far From Home was directly after... Endgame. Doctor Strange does not overstay his welcome. He's only in a little bit of the movie. Same with the crossover of the Spider-Man. It happens when it needs to happen, and it's just superbly done. It's like the most spectacular sequence of the franchise. And it really, they give Garfield a redeeming moment from where Amazing Spider-Man 2. Electro. Oh my god, Jamie Foxx truly got to redeem himself as Electro with this one, because his Electro was so awesome in this that I was like, man, I would love to see this version of Electro be done again and given his own movie. Something Amazing Spider-Man 2 failed to do. William Dafoe continues his perfection. Same with Molina. I will say I do wish there had been done a little bit more had been done with Molina, but that first fight scene on the bridge towards the beginning of the movie with Octopus was what I really love to see in a Doc Ock Spider-Man fight. I had been waiting forever to see a fight sequence like that. I mean, overall, I think my favorite version of Doc Ock is the one from the recent PS4 and PS5 video games. But Molina does a great job. And then we have, like I said, William Dafoe's Green Goblin. The story of with Tom Holland's Peter is just so done. It feels like this whole trilogy was an origin story for Peter. Like, we had several movies to make his origin story, not just one movie. And it works really well. I'm curious to see where things go from here. I really hope now, the next Spider-Man movies, we get all self-contained stories that don't require you to see other MCU movies to enjoy. I really want to see Hobgoblin appear. I mean, they can easily have Kingsley takes the technology that Norman left behind in that universe and creates his own goblin army. Or, I say army because he uses a lot of decoy hobgoblins to fake his death. Ned Leeds is not a hobgoblin. Not hobgoblin. He was a decoy. And it does One More Day better than the comic book version of One More Day. I think it helps it wasn't retconning like 50 years of history. But yes, it was incredible. I do think, on the negatives, I don't like how Sandman and Lizard are CGI the entire time. Even when they revert back to human form, they're still CGI models of the actors. I don't like that aspect. I was a little disappointed they couldn't just get the actors in there for like a day. Yeah. It is an incredible Spider-Man movie. What is your favorite Spider-Man movie? Who is your favorite Spider-Man? It's hard to say. Garfield is not my favorite. Holland, I think, really is my favorite because he encompasses the best of both Peter and Spider-Man. Tobey was an incredible Peter with a pretty good Spider-Man. Garfield was an excellent Spider-Man, but a meh Peter. But what is your favorite Spider-Man movie? Which is your favorite of the series? Let me know in the comments. Click like, subscribe, the bell notification, whatever else YouTube has you clicking on to support me. You can support me on Facebook, Instagram, Discord at Kaiju no Kami, Bluesky, and Patreon at tokuaannetwork. Network. And then my website is creativitybydesignllc.com. You can buy cool Kaiju no Kami merchandise at creativitybydesignllc.com/shop. There's a link in the description below. And until next time, bye.